Thank you very much, Rhea, for the introduction. And I also thank you, Simran, for the logistics and getting this started. It's an honor to be here and present this topic. And I hope to have some engagement and some discussions at the end of my talk. So basically, I'm giving a broad overview of the prehistory of India, challenges and prospects. So basically trying to get everybody up to speed on the latest discoveries and the status of our knowledge, and also current problems and current major research questions that we need to be addressing. And that might also help the younger scholars in choosing specific master's and PhD thesis topics as well. So to begin with, what is the significance of this zone, the Indian zone or Indian subcontinent? It's located in the center of the Old World, as you can see on this slide, and it links the paleoanthropological records of Africa, Europe, and Eastern and Southeastern Asia. Stone tools were historically discovered here roughly at the same time as in Europe in the 1800s. We have evidence of continuous human occupation for at least 1.5 million years and maybe extending to beyond 2 million. But there are problems with the earliest evidence, as I'll show later. The region preserves stone technologies from all prehistoric phases. This is very important because other regions in the surrounding zones, such as Central Asia, East Asia, and Southeast Asia, don't have all technologies of prehistoric periods. For example, La Valba technology is missing, or Acheulean is missing, etc. But the subcontinent has majority of these technologies. We also had a lot of fauna, such as hippos, ostriches, various horse species, elephant species, and others that are now extinct. So that is also an indicator of how rich the faunal diversity was in the past, and how and what kind of opportunities the human populations would have had for ecological adaptations, for subsistence, and coevolution. Now, despite an abundance of dates, abundance of sites, there are very few dates existing. So far, based on compilation of published records, we have over 3,500 known prehistoric sites, and specifically Lower Paleolithic, Middle Paleolithic, Upper Paleolithic, and Microlithic and Mesolithic. So what's the problem? One is lack of prehistoric research compared to other zones. Most attention is received by younger time periods, so there's less focus on the prehistoric phase. Another issue is lack of funding, or lack of labs, or lack of expertise. A lot of these dates have been done in the 1970s, 80s, and 1990s and require verification, and many new sites since then also require dating for the first time. And it'd be viable to combine methods to confirm the ages of these sites, but some dates are more reliable than others. And as you can see here, some are Acheulean sites. Now there's a growing number of Middle Paleolithic sites being dated, especially because there has been improvement in the refinement of luminescence technology. So certain technologies are now easily available, and they're also being done through collaboration with experts outside of India. So we are getting more and more dates in the last 1 decade, I would say. However, compared to other regions of the Old World, we need many, many more dates, not only for the stone tool sites, but also for the fossil vertebrate sites. Now, coming to the earliest evidence, I'm going to be approaching this topic chronologically. So to summarize the known evidence chronologically. So if you look at Oldowan or pre-Acheulean evidence, a lot of sites have been reported from Symbolic zone of Pakistan and India, and as well as the Narmada Valley in central India. As you can see, there's various sites such as Durkadi, Mahadevapuriya, Uttarbeni, Nada, etc. So in summary, so far we don't have any convincing evidence of pre-Acheulean occupation at the moment. Even though sites have been reported, there are problems with their context, or lack of dates, or lack of excavations, or demonstrating properly that they're typotechnologically Oldowan or pre-Acheulean artifacts. So at the moment, the earliest non-controversial record belongs to Acheulean evidence, but all of these sites have been reported. And if you look at it from a broad perspective, based on amount of investigations and multidisciplinary efforts, we have a few sites that are a bit more reliable than others. For example, Riwat and Pabi Hills in Pakistan have been intensively studied by a British and Pakistani team. And these are kind of the most reliable benchmarks we have in terms of typology, context, dating, and geographic location as well. Because the Symbolics preserve very lengthy early quaternary sequences, it's easier to survey for Oldowan sites in those regions. Plus, these areas have faunal preservation as well. So a recent study near Chandigarh has yielded this evidence on the bottom you see here, potential cut mark bone indicating butchery, going back to 2.6 million. Again, this is controversial because it does not come from excavated context. It's coming from surface context, and the marks may or may not indicate other processes, taphonomic processes, and may not represent evidence of butchery. But more such evidence is required. This evidence may actually be legitimate, but we cannot be sure because the artifacts and the cut marked evidence come from two different contexts. However, it is a tantalizing hint that there might be similar evidence out there. If legitimate, it suggests the earliest evidence of hominins outside of Africa in this zone. What we also need is surveys for Oldowan sites beyond the Symbolic Hills, other parts of India, for example. So this is a problem related to context that I'll show in a few minutes. So if you're looking at distribution of sediments, if you want to find Oldowan sites that are 2 million years old or 2+ million years old, we need to find sediments that are 2+ million years old. And if you look at it at a broad perspective, very few sites have been reported that are pre-Middle Pleistocene in age. We have sites such as Chirkinavasa, Morgaon, Isampur, Atirampakkam, Bhasi, which go beyond the normal polarity when we look at magnetic dating, or we look at, for example, biochronology, etc., and stratigraphy. So basically, first we need to find the context in these parts or regions beyond the Symbolic zone, and then look for potential early Pleistocene or late Pliocene fauna, and then look for Oldowan artifacts. Because if hominins reached East Asia, especially China, by 2.1 million years ago, and Southeast Asia about 1.5 million years ago, it is very highly probable that Oldowan hominins did reach the Indian subcontinent. Now, the sites might be deeply buried, or many of the sites may have been destroyed by agriculture and other processes, or it's possible that they've not been well preserved since human occupation. However, no focused or targeted work on early Pleistocene context has been done yet. So this shows that there's a lack of geological context when it comes to finding Oldowan sites. And the problem with Symbolic Hills, while it preserves the sedimentary records, they're also tectonically disturbed, very dynamic landscape, and also devoid of stone during the Pinjor times and terminal Tatrate times. So even if hominins were present in that zone, it's not clear if stone was readily available and if those low-profile assemblages got preserved by chance. But more surveys are required to verify this. And if you look at the Acheulean record, it is more dominant. Now this gray zone is where the Acheulean record is dominant, and on the eastern side, you see the red dots. These are newly discovered Acheulean or Acheulean-like sites in the eastern zone. So the Mobius line at the moment does not apply to the Acheulean record anymore. However, it continues to apply at a broad sense for Lavalva technology. Now these yellow lines represent Tibetan Plateau and Himalaya as possible topographic barriers, and the arrows represent potential movements of populations from west to east. And there's at least one site, which is Boza in southern China, which represents maybe a second invention or innovation of Motu technology. So we're looking at more than one innovation of Acheulean-like evidence, not just one origin in Africa and then spread. The central zone is more suitable for, at the moment, a more popular route for dispersal, because the evidence from Northeast India and surrounding zones is currently lacking. So we don't have any indication that the Indian subcontinent was used as a potential corridor. Now looking at mapped lower Paleolithic occurrences, so far at least 1,000 have been mapped by my colleagues and I and presented in a conference. And we are in the process of publishing this evidence. You can see Acheulean sites, which dominate this evidence, are distributed all across the subcontinent. Areas where they are low profile, it is due to various factors, including lack of research or inaccessibility because socio-political problems, especially in eastern India. And then could be buried under sand dunes in Rajasthan, could be buried under Ganga plains in the north, etc. And otherwise, majority of these sites are distributed across the subcontinent, so indicating very diverse adaptations to different habitats. Now, some unique features of Indian Acheulean. We have crystals found in Rajasthan, fossilized tree fragments found in Maharashtra, animal footprints found in Tamil Nadu, and possible stone alignments in South India, and couple engravings in central India, and possible post holes in Paitsra, Bihar. So these are just key sites yielding unique evidences for the Indian Acheulean. And what is also unique about Indian Acheulean is that it survives very late compared to its counterparts across the old world, compared to Europe, parts of Asia, and Africa. Bifaces, large bifaces continue up to 100,000 years ago, and small bifaces seem to continue up to 60,000 years ago. Here's a look at the oldest known Acheulean site, Atirimpakkam, and also famous for being historically the earliest known Paleolithic evidence reported in the 1800s by Robert Bruce Foote. And 6 meters of deposits have preserved early Acheulean layers as well as early Middle Paleolithic layers. This is going back to 1.5 million, which shows arrival of humans here just within 300,000 years of the invention of this technology in Africa. Another key site is Isampur in Karnataka, and this is not a very deeply buried site. It only has single cultural horizons. However, what is unique about this site is that it is a quarry site. You can see different phases of manipulation of the limestone bedrock at this site, including extraction of the slabs, to initial flaking, to shaping, to transport, to finished products, to utilization and discard. Here we have the clusters of individual napping episodes. In other words, artifacts within these clusters refit with each other, indicating primary context of the site. And we also are finding unique evidence of certain technologies surviving longer. For a long time, we thought that Singhi Talab in Rajasthan is older than 800,000 or older than the normal polarity. However, dating of this site suggests younger ages for this primitive technology. So early Acheulean typology dates to 177,000 years and 85,000 years respectively. However, more research is required to explain this phenomenon and whether this extends to other parts of the subcontinent. Did this primitive looking technology and morphology, was it retained or adapted and survived longer because of geographic isolation or other cultural reasons or ecological reasons or raw material reasons? We don't know at the moment. And then Bembetka is a rare occurrence of stratified lower Paleolithic occupation in cave context or rock shelter context. Almost all other evidence of lower Paleolithic sites is dominated by open air context. So this is an exception. If you're looking at diversity within the bifaces, especially hand axes, in this case, over 2,000 hand axe measurements were compiled from publications to see if they divide broadly into early and late phases, as has been traditionally classified. But it indicated that there's a very diverse set of measurements and a range, actually, of multiple groups and clusters, indicating intermediate transformation, progression, and development within the Indian Acheulean. This can represent maybe more than one dispersal of Acheulean into the region, as well as indigenous development of the technology over time, and very diverse toolkits across the subcontinent. And there may be correlations as well between raw material size constraints and size of the bifaces in different ecozones. It is also an issue understanding the relationship between Soanian and Acheulean in the Symbolic zone. This technology, the Soanian, was reported in the 1930s by Duterte Patterson. However, we have no properly excavated sites, no absolute dates for this technology and adaptation. It is now accepted that it was probably not a separate culture, but majority of the assemblages seem to be post-Acheulean in age, although some assemblages, especially in Kangra Valley, might be contemporary with the late Acheulean. But this needs to be confirmed, whether Acheulean hominins were making this technology or other populations were adapted to this technology. Here we have different artifact types within the Soanian toolkit, including choppers, core scrapers, cores, flakes, flake tools, hammerstones, and unifaces as well. This is the general distribution of both technologies across the Symbolic zone in Pakistan, India, and Nepal. You can see Acheulean sites are not abundant, whereas the Soanian evidence is more abundant. This is because of the dominance of raw material, especially pebbles, cobbles, and boulders. And the size constraints is probably a reason why the Acheulean is in low profile in the Symbolic zone. And only known fossil evidence at the moment is represented by this cranium found at Hathnora, and also later a clavicle. The cranium was discovered by Professor Sonakia of the GSI, and the clavicle was discovered by Dr. Sanghian of the Anthropological Survey of India. But you can see the site of Hathnora, it is divided into two different lithological facies. On the top right, we have the fine-grained Bonetta formation, and in the bottom, we have the coarse-grained or gravelly Surajkund formation. And this is where the material has been found, unfortunately, in secondary deposit. But we do know that the fossil is probably a female, not a Homo sapiens. Its exact taxonomic identity is still not clearly known because it's not very diagnostic specimen, not complete enough. And unfortunately, because it comes from a secondary context, the minimum age we can assign to it at the moment is 50,000 years old, although it could be even 500,000 years old or 1 million years old. It's not exactly clear what the origin, the geographic origin of this specimen was, but it's redeposited with fossils of other animals of different ages. So stone tools and fossils of different ages have been mixed and deposited in this gravel. And looking at the Middle Paleolithic, again, a wide distribution indicating diverse habitat adaptations and also more mobility because of smaller artifact size. And they are more abundant in areas we're not expecting, such as Thar Desert. Again, the Ngagna Plains is kind of a blank because most of the sites are probably buried within the deep alluvium. Although such sites as Skalpi and others have been reported, they're not clear if they represent classic Middle Paleolithic or not. What is unique about this technology is that now we have a growing number of dates, so extending to almost 500,000 years ago, so close to sites in Africa and Europe, and surviving contemporarily with Microlithic or Mesolithic technologies. What is interesting also about this is that this Lavalva or prepared core technology does not seem to go beyond Northeast India or Eastern India. We have not found it in surrounding zones yet. So it's not clear if this technology went beyond Northeast India. It's possible that whatever has been reported in the central zone and eastern zone of Asia, that went through Central Asia. But this indicates that the technology was used and made and innovated by different hominins, not necessarily attributed to Homo sapiens only as previously thought. So now we have indigenous, possibly indigenous development of the technology, and I'll talk about that in a minute. What I want to show here is that a lot of these Lavalva-like elements are broadly contemporary between 400,000 and 500,000, or between 300,000 and 500,000 at various locations. In other words, we have multiple origins of the Middle Paleolithic, not a single origin in Africa, and then dispersal. So now we have India showing ages of 385,000, Eastern Europe showing ages of 335,000, and contemporary sites in Western Europe and Africa, as you can see here. So you also see elements of classical lava missing and present at various sites. And what is intriguing about this time period is that the parallel evolution is not only happening with archaeology, but also with the fossils. We have Homo sapiens appearing in Africa at this time, and we have the Neanderthals appearing in Europe at this time, and possibly something else contemporary in Asia. So we have multiple species appearing at the same time in the form of a global transition of technology and biology. And Athirumbakam again plays a central role in this. At the moment, it is the oldest known Middle Paleolithic site outside of Africa, and basically contemporary with the earliest Middle Paleolithic sites. Again, depends on which criteria you use to define Middle Paleolithic, because it has been very difficult to separate the earliest Middle Paleolithic from terminal Acheulean because of overlapping features, because the transition lasts for 200 or 300,000 years. But what is happening is we have beginning of small bifaces, decrease in large bifaces, appearance of blades, points, and other specialized tool types, and also prepared core technology becoming more and more common. So basically the subsistence and the technology is geared towards more light-duty tasks rather than heavy-duty tasks, as with the larger artifacts in the Lower Paleolithic. However, we don't know exactly how this transition happened and which hominin species were responsible for this, maybe more than one species, but we have still not found the transitional evidence from Acheulean to Middle Paleolithic yet, but various landscape evidences, specific assemblages in surface context and stratified context, show that there definitely was an indigenous transition. However, the transitional evidence has yet to be found. Based on similar toolkits, for example, Mousterian, present in various parts of the subcontinent, has prompted some researchers to consider the presence of Neanderthals in South Asia, especially the northern zones of South Asia, Pakistan, Symbolics, etc. So Mousterian technology is usually attributed to Neanderthals, and this could represent an extension of their home range into the subcontinent. Now, whether these populations were also present in other parts, such as central India, peninsular India, is not clear, but at the same time, it is not impossible. We have various hominin species at this time. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Now, getting to the next big question at this time frame, when does Homo sapiens reach South Asia, and with which technology? So at the moment, if you look at the Lower Paleolithic, it is ending around 120,000 years ago, as you can see with this red dot. So we have the site of Sengitilav going back to 85,000. Then we have the sites in Son Valley in central India, the youngest large flake Acheulean, dating to about 120,000. So among the youngest large flake Acheulean in the world. That is like a benchmark for Lower Paleolithic. But then if you look at the fossil evidence of Homo sapiens extending to 38,000 in Sri Lanka, modern DNA of tribal populations suggesting arrival by 60,000, microlithic assemblages, which are globally attributed to Homo sapiens, are 48,000 years old in central India and Sri Lanka. So this clearly indicates that Homo sapiens was definitely there, probably 60,000 years onwards. But then we have these younger assemblages, Middle Paleolithic, which has been also identified to be associated with Homo sapiens by some researchers. 77,000 years ago in Jwalapuram, Andhra Pradesh, 90,000-year-old artifacts in Rajasthan, and 114,000-year-old artifacts in Gujarat, the site of Sandav in Kutch. So all of these broadly compare with comparable evidences in other parts of Eurasia and Africa, thought to represent occupation and adaptation by prehistoric Homo sapiens. However, we need fossil evidence belonging to this time period and in association with these technologies to confirm that we have Homo sapiens arriving very early. So this is a bit controversial. And what makes it more complicated is that we have an indigenous Middle Paleolithic at Atinapakkam at 385,000. So that now kind of challenges the identity. It does challenge, it does not challenge. So one possibility or scenario is that all of the Middle Paleolithic evidence belongs to other species and not Homo sapiens. Another interpretation could be that the earliest Middle Paleolithic was made by archaic populations, and the younger Middle Paleolithic was made by more than one species, including Homo sapiens. So we can have multiple interpretations, multiple hypotheses to test. However, we need fossil evidence to verify which hominins are responsible for which technologies. And this is also applicable to the various lower Paleolithic technologies. Now, appearance of microliths, the same problem is there. We don't know if they were innovated in South Asia or introduced to South Asia. Very few sites yield the oldest evidence, and no sites so far yield proper transitional evidence, except maybe Patne in central India. Maybe it goes from early and late Upper Paleolithic to Microlithic and Mesolithic, but there are very few dates from the site. And the technology continues into historical times. Some of the youngest microliths in the world occur in India. And then we have this issue of diversity of assemblages across the subcontinent. For example, at 45,000 years ago, multiple sites have been given different classifications. Site 55 in Pakistan has been classified as Upper Paleolithic, tentatively. The site of Kalpi has been classified as Middle Paleolithic, and Methakeri has been classified as Microlithic. However, they're all the same age, 45,000 years old. So if you look at all this evidence, let's say within the last 100,000 years, there's very high diversity. Some sites have bifaces, some sites don't have bifaces, some sites are dominated by flakes, some sites are dominated by blades or laminar technology, and some sites have multiple technologies at single locations. So it's not clear exactly how these transitions were taking place and whether different cultural groups or different species were responsible for certain technological variations. For example, we have all of these species present and contemporary with Homo sapiens, especially in the last 200,000 years. We have Denisovans, Homo longi, the red deer cave people, the Neanderthals, Homo luzonensis, and Homo floresiensis. Some of them are, of course, have evolved because of geographic isolation. Others are very widespread. For example, Homo erectus is widespread and survives late in East Asia. The Neanderthals are quite widespread, and Denisovans are quite widespread. Luzonensis so far is only found in Philippines. Homo longi so far is only found in China. And it's possible that there were other species not yet discovered present in South Asia as well. And coming to the Upper Paleolithic, we have, again, very few sites known. This distribution is mysterious. One reason is because of lack of research. Another reason could be lack of raw materials suitable for making laminar technology. And also, classification can also vary between researchers. So it's possible that certain zones did not preserve some of these assemblages, or the raw material was not suitable. And it's possible that there was more research bias in identifying Acheulean sites and less focused research on Upper Paleolithic sites. Problems with the terminology, especially because Upper Paleolithic is overlapping with preceding Middle Paleolithic and younger Mesolithic evidences. Very few sites have been dated, and also certain terminologies have been introduced which kind of mask the regional diversity and exclusive transitional entities. For example, the term late Paleolithic has been introduced without proper research, I feel. We need more dates, more excavations, and more investigations in different ecozones before we can know or decide whether we should call this evidence Upper Paleolithic or late Paleolithic or mixed technologies, etc. Not enough research and not enough dates are existing to classify these assemblages. But it's important to note that the Indian Upper Paleolithic was classified based on European evidence historically. But we do have large blades at key sites, but not across the entire subcontinent. We have very few sites representing multiple cultures. So far, only Atarampakam, 16 Ardun, Bhimbetka, Patne, and Dhaba preserve different cultural sequences. So it's not possible to study transitions between these phases. We need more such sites across the subcontinent. And also a big issue is Toba super eruption. What kind of impact did it have? We have the volcanic ash belonging to the Toba volcano, and the super eruption 74,000 years ago has preserved this evidence in various locations. So one question is, how did it affect the ecology? How did it affect human populations? Was there technological change? Which species was present during the eruption? So one issue is lack of primary sites with artifacts above and below the ash. The post-Tephra artifacts are often too young to assess precise impacts. In other words, there's often a chronological gap between the ash and the artifacts. And more data is required from different environments across India. For example, populations in Thar Desert may have reacted differently compared to populations in southern India, as versus populations in Northeast India, and so on and so forth. Now, looking at butchery, another evidence that has been absent is butchery evidence. This actually find is coming from Kashmir and was kind of reported about 25 years ago, but recent research has highlighted it in a more scientific manner. Several stone tools and faunal evidence of proboscideans was found in geological association, so possibly representing one of the best studied and abundant evidence of butchery or meat consumption in South Asia. We need more sites like this. But what is intriguing is that this is older. This evidence is older, going back to the late Middle Pleistocene, than the current issues about faunal extinctions address. So this site is about between 200,000 and 300,000 years old and indicates presence of Middle Paleolithic in Kashmir Valley and adaptation to possibly high altitude environments. But when we look at the fossil record, we see evidences of various fauna becoming extinct much later. For example, Boston hippos, wild horse, 2 species of elephants, and ostrich become extinct in the last 50,000 years. So there's no correlation at the moment as you have in North America or Australia or Madagascar and other places where we can consider or discuss the overkill hypothesis. We don't have enough evidence in South Asia of hominins targeting or over-targeting one specific species or one specific group of animals. It is possible that a lot of these fauna become extinct indirectly. In other words, through increasing stress from encroachment by human populations. Because keep in mind that the last 50,000 years is also the time when Homo sapiens enters with microlith technology or spreads it rapidly across the subcontinent. Soon after 50,000, microliths are found everywhere between 50,000 and 30,000 years ago, indicating a large amount of mobility, dispersals, occupation, adaptations, and adaptations to different ecozones, which may have affected the survivability of many of these species. Of course, we also have indirect evidence of exploitation of some of these fauna. For example, numerous ostrich eggshell fragments are found at terminal Paleolithic and Microlithic sites across the subcontinent, especially the arid zones, may indicate targeting of ostrich eggs and may have contributed majorly to the extinction of ostrich in India. Then coming to rock art, and I'm including this aspect because it extends into prehistoric times. we don't know are the ages of various sites, whether symbolic behavior was introduced or innovated or both. What were the regional purposes of this art? What was the identity of the painters? We should not assume that all art was created by hunter-gatherers. It could have been created by farmers as well, pastoralists, and other cultural groups. So we have this evidence of global symbolic behavior in terms of engraved specimens, ornaments, figurines, paintings, and you can see the ages as well. But in India, we don't have similar evidence. We have crystals representing symbolic behavior at Acheulean site in Rajasthan. But more widely known, we have ostrich eggshell fragments. We have at the moment 1 or 2 fragments engraved coming from Maharashtra. But South African sites, we have hundreds of specimens that are engraved. Then we have paintings, which are more abundant, but again, the ages are not known. Majority of the paintings are associated with Microlithic evidence, and the paintings span different time periods, not just prehistoric. Here we have diversity within the paintings of horseback riders. Similar diversity exists in prehistoric themes such as deer, geometric patterns, etc. And if you look at overall counts of themes in rock art, animal figures, human figures, and geometric designs are the highest in number. And then historical designs and other themes are less in number. Here is an example of one of the dated engravings found in South India, 4,500 years old. Again, geometric or abstract design from Andhra Pradesh. And then we have abundance of engravings in laterite coming from Konkan in Maharashtra and other coastal zones. And some of this is very stylistic, very intricate, and interestingly very large. And also well made, anatomically accurate and proportionate, and includes fauna, human beings, geometric patterns, and a lot of other designs. Now, if you look at a summary of all the known prehistoric evidence, the common features, we have all technologies from Paleolithic and Neolithic. Now there's growing evidence of butchery, such as the Kashmir evidence. We have adaptation of different ecozones across the subcontinent. We have an engraved ostrich eggshell specimen, just like African sites. We have presence of megaliths, possibly going back to prehistoric times. But then looking at the unique features, oldest Acheulean and Middle Paleolithic outside of Africa, oldest microliths in Asia, unique cleaver technique at Chirki, Nevasa. We have unique evidence of Harappan seals, which are not found outside of this domain, except few sites in the Middle East. Neolithic ash mounds are also broadly unique to Asia, South Asia. Then specific rock art themes and styles are also unique. The Konkan laterite engravings are unique in their styles. Then we have evidence of indigenous domestication and pit dwellings, etc. Just regional archaeological characters that are not common outside of the subcontinent. Now I'm going to end my talk with broad questions for Indian prehistory and specific questions for Indian prehistory. One is, how many dispersals were there into India, and what are the connections with surrounding zones like Central Asia, Southeast Asia, Iran? Which hominid species were present in India for the last 2 million years? We need more fossils. When did earliest Homo sapiens reach, and how did they replace archaic populations? This is a mystery. In Europe, we have evidence of interbreeding with Neanderthals, but what was going on in South Asia? What were the various factors of technological changes the last 2 million years? Climatic factors, social factors, etc. What were the subsistence strategies of the various species? Beyond meat eating, what were they targeting? Were Microlithic and Paleolithic assemblages indigenous, introduced, or both? What was the purpose and age of the various rock art? What were all the factors of multiple faunal extinctions in the last 1 million years or 2 million years? How can the sites and associated materials such as fossils, sections, artifacts be better preserved, not only at the sites, but also in museum collections? And finally, how can underrepresented ethnic groups be formally more involved as collaborating stakeholders? Most of the prehistoric research has been done by outsiders. And when I say outsiders, I'm talking about Westerners as well as South Asian researchers that are not indigenously represented by specific ethnic groups. So tribal populations and other contemporary or comparable groups should be more involved in this research. Now, looking at specific questions, what are the ages of key sites and paleo evidences? As I said, we just have 2 or 3 dozen dates, but we have thousands of sites. What are the paleo-environmental contexts of various adaptations? Did Oldowan technology reach India, and how long did it last? Why is there no early Acheulean in Gujarat and no late Acheulean in Maharashtra? Why is there no Acheulean in Kerala, southern Tamil Nadu, and Sri Lanka? Why is there no Paleolithic evidence in northeastern India? Some evidence has been reported, but it is not convincing, and the context is not clear, the dates are not clear. Why is there no Neolithic polished axes in Western India and Central India? Why do microliths continue into the Iron Age? Some of the youngest evidences in the world. So these are just broad questions that need to be addressed through different research topics and new methodologies, especially dating, paleoenvironmental reconstruction, experimental archaeology, etc. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm ready to take questions or suggestions or comments.